Good afternoon, friends. A very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. At the very outset, I would like to thank the Indian Express Group, Financial Express, Meghalaya Tourism, and the entire team for giving me this opportunity of making this presentation to all of you today. Thank you very much, the entire team, and for this wonderful event. So it's always great to be back in the mountains, and it was great to fly into Meghalaya this morning. When I landed, the weather was beautiful, it was green, and it was actually a feast for the eyes. So my presentation today is called Mountain Moments, Photographs from the Himalaya. South Col Expeditions, I'll just touch on it, is a very small company. You can almost say that it's a one-man company, and it does treks, climbs, and photography trips and workshops, mainly in the Himalaya, which includes places like Africa, Kilimanjaro, Mount Meru, Kenya, and so on, and the Indian Himalaya, Nepal, and Bhutan. So this photograph, the opening photograph of the presentation, is in fact shot in Nepal. It's shot in an area called Solukhumbu, which is the home of the Sherpas. And the moon is in fact coming up as the sun has gone down. It's dusk. The mountain on the right, the shapely spire, is called Amadablam, 6,852 meters, one of the most spectacular mountains of the Khumbu. And the first peak on the left here with the cloud on top of it is Everest, and next to that is Mount Lhotse. So we'll start with Ladakh and Zanskar because that is an area which we visit very often. And this photograph shows the village of Photosur in Zanskar. So to give you a background, Photosur was on a very popular trek in Ladakh called the Across Zanskar Trek. That trek used to start around the monastery of Lamayuru, cross 7 passes, come to the capital of Zanskar, Padam, and then if you had the inclination and the drive, you could proceed beyond Padam to Phuktal, and then cross the Shingola and end up in Darcha. So it was one of the signature treks of Ladakh. It was a 21-day trek. We did this trek almost 15 years ago, but unfortunately now, like many parts of the Himalaya, the entire trek has been impacted by roads. There are multiple roads coming into Zanskar. One road follows the Zanskar River, which has in fact killed the Chadda trek, which used to be a very famous trek in Ladakh. And there is another road which goes across these passes and comes and ends up in Padam. So there's a lot of, what will I say, jeep tourism now in Ladakh, more than I think trekking tourism. So if you fly into Leh on the Delhi to Leh flight on an early morning, look at your left side, you will see this spectacular view of the glaciers and the mountain ranges behind, extending all the way to the Karakoram. And I've been doing this flight every year for almost 20 years. But recently I've been observing that all these glaciers which you see, which are packed with snow, have now no more snow. Most of them are rock, most of them are rubble, and thanks to the problems of global warming, climate change, and general overheating of the planet, we are left with very little snow. And that is really unfortunate. So Markha remains the most popular trek of Ladakh. If you ask anybody, one trek which you want to do in Ladakh, they will say you do Markha. So this is in fact on one of our Markha treks. We do Markha quite often, even though that trek is also impacted now by roads. So this is the Markha campsite, and you can see the moon which is rising above the monastery. You can just see the shadow of the monastery at the back. This is also on the Markha trek. So if you're there in summer, in the months of July and August, you would find the Markha village with these beautiful mustard fields and the trails going on to Umlung. And the Markha trek actually culminates in a pass called the Kongmarula. So this is in fact my trekking group approaching the pass of Kongmarula. And behind the mountain which you see is Kangyatse. So there are 2 Kangyatses. The peak on the right, I don't have a pointer, so I can't point, but the peak on the right is actually Kangyatse 2, which is now a very popular trekking peak. I think some of you may know that the most popular trekking peak of Ladakh was Stok Kangri, and that had the maximum climbs. But sometime around, I think, 2018 or 19, Stok Kangri was closed. The villagers of Stok village said they did not want Stok Kangri to be open anymore because of the degradation of the environment. So they closed Stok Kangri in 2018, and it's been closed since. So sadly, after Stok was closed, Kangyatse 2 replaced Stok as the peak which everybody climbed. So now if you go to the Kangyatse 2 base camp in summer, you would possibly find maybe 200, 300 climbers there. So I'm not sure if if Kangyatse 2 is becoming another stock Kangri, and the Ladakh Association may think of doing something there itself. So this is another signature location of Ladakh, So Moriri. There is again a trek which comes to So Moriri. It crosses from a village called Rumse through another lake called Sokar, and then it comes to So Moriri. It's about a 5-6 day trek, but you can also drive to So Moriri. There's a jeepable road which takes 5-6 hours, and from Leh you can hit So Moriri. So this is a picture taken almost at the end of the season. I was there once in mid-October, and that is the reason why the grass is almost turning brown. The Pashmina goats and the sheep are being sent out to the pasture to graze. The lake So Moriri, and behind it is two peaks of that region, Chamser Kangri and Lungser Kangri. So this is another trek in Ladakh which has not been impacted by roads. It's called the Phiang to Hunda trek, which goes from the valley of the Indus, crosses the Lazarmola Pass and enters the Nubra Valley. And you come back by driving across from Khardungla. So this is some of my group descending on the other side. We've crossed the Lazarmola, and when you descend on the Nubra side, there's a big glaciated ice field which you need to navigate, and you need to go down. It's still a very spectacular trek, and it's still worth doing. So now we come to Spiti. Spiti borders Ladakh. It's also part of the Trans-Himalaya, both Lahul and Spiti. So this is near Kaza. This is the Spiti River, which carves a riverbed like this near the town of Kaza. And there are some yaks and sheep which are grazing at the bottom next to the river. So Spiti also had a trek which was known as the Spiti Left Bank Trek, which went from the village of Langza, which is above Kaza, at about 13,000 feet. It traveled through Komik, the village of Komik. Komik is famous because it has the highest post office. It traveled through the village of Komik, Demul, Lalung, and then came to Dhankar. So we did this trek again some years back, but again there is a road now, so you can drive a jeep through most of this trek. And this is a view before reaching Demul. The sheep are being grazed on the pastures in the month of October. So blue sheep is the main prey of the snow leopard, and most of the high Himalayan area sees a good population of blue sheep. This was in Spiti as well. So though I've seen a lot of blue sheep on all my treks, unfortunately I've never seen the snow leopard. I've seen pug marks in the snow and so on. But now if you go to Ladakh and Spiti in February or March, there are specific snow leopard tours. You can join somebody, like there are experienced trackers in Ladakh and in Spiti who run snow leopard tours. So you have a good chance of seeing the snow leopard. We now come closer to home. We come to the Sikkim Himalaya. And Sikkim is the home of a mountain which is very close to my heart, Kanchenjunga. Kanchenjunga is the third highest mountain in the world. And it's also the guardian deity of the Sikkimese people who worship Kanchenjunga. And for all of us who live in Darjeeling, we always think of looking out and at that great view of Kanchenjunga. But this is not actually a view of Kanchenjunga. This is a view on the extreme corner of the North Sikkim Plateau, where there is a lake called Cholamu. Cholamu is supposed to be the source of the Tista River. And above Cholamu, there is a high viewpoint called Dorjila, which is manned by the Indian Army because they can see into Tibet from that high viewpoint. So this was a sunset view from Dorjila. It's extremely spectacular, but difficult to reach. So there is a trek in North Sikkim, which is known as the Green Lakes Trek, and it follows the valley of the Zemu Glacier, and it comes to the northeast base camp of Kanchenjunga, which is known as Green Lakes. And on that trek, you have a very spectacular mountain, which is not very high. It's 6,852 meters, called Sinyolchu. So this is a view of Sinyolchu from a camp, one camp short of Green Lakes, called Rest Camp. You can see some of my trekkers who've stepped out into the sun because it's a cold camp. So they wanted the early morning sunlight, and they could see the spectacular view of Sinyolchu as well as the glacier. And in 1899, a British explorer by the name of Douglas Freshfield, along with an Italian very famous photographer by the name of Vittorio Sella, did a circuit of Kanchenjunga, which was later made into a book called Round Kanchenjunga. And Freshfield saw this mountain for the first time, and he wrote in his book that Sinyolchu was the most superb triumph of mountain architecture and the most beautiful snow mountain in the world. It's really a spectacular peak. So Sikkim is famous for flowers, Rhododendrons would be the flower which everybody would go to see in Sikkim. If you go to North Sikkim or if you go to West Sikkim, Zongri area, in April, May, you would see a lot of rhododendrons. But this picture is of primulas, taken in June, just as the monsoon was about to break. And it's below another high pass called Lonakla. The Lonakla Pass travels from Lachen to Thangu and then swings west. And it enters a valley called Lonak, which has a headquarters called Muguthang, also a very remote area of Sikkim. But these primulas are quite spectacular. And after taking this picture, in fact, I've been looking for primulas like this all over the Himalaya. I've seen primulas, but I've not seen primulas like this. They were enormous, they were huge, and they were actually perfect. So Sikkim, as everyone knows, is very rich in forests. It's, other than flowers, the forest, the vegetation is very rich. So on the Green Lakes Trail, we actually go through a forest on the second day, and this was one of the photographs I took. I'm not a botanist, so I'm not sure what it is. It was like tendrils coming out of a tree, and then you have this reddish bark of a tree, which also looks very spectacular. So in May 1987, I visited the Green Lakes Base Camp, where there was an expedition led by Assam Rifles. Assam Rifles had taken an expedition to climb Kanchenjunga. The peak at the back, where the snow is sort of flying off, is actually Kanchenjunga, and that is the north-east spur of Kanchenjunga. So the gentleman on the right with the binoculars is the leader of the expedition, Major General Kukreti. So he asked me that, why don't we climb up 300-400 meters so that we'll get a view of the mountain and we can see my climbers, what they're doing. So this is where we came up. We climbed about 300-400 meters above the base camp, which is below, and we sat here and he was scanning the mountain. But the reason why I'm showing you this picture is actually to show you the Zemu Glacier. If you look at the Zemu Glacier, which is descending from Kanchenjunga, the entire Zemu Glacier this is in 1987. The entire Zemu Glacier in 1987 is packed with snow. There's hardly any rock, there's hardly any rubble, and even the ridges above have got snow. But I'll show you another picture soon to follow this, and then you will see. So I went back in 2014 with a trekking group to the same area. I went to Green Lakes, and I stood where the Green Lake was. My photograph on the left was the 1987 photograph of the Green Lake, and you can see Kanchenjunga was reflected in the Green Lake. And I went back in 2014. The angle is almost the same. I didn't have my earlier picture, so I couldn't compare, but if you look closely, the angle is almost the same, and there is no more Green Lake. The Green Lake, thanks to lack of snow, thanks to global warming, thanks to climate change, has vanished, and there is this rock bed which is there in front of the mountain. So this is actually living proof, which I have seen, that how climate change has actually impacted us. This water section on the right should have been water, but there is actually no more water left. It's extremely tragic. So we now come to an area which is very close to my heart. It borders India to the north, the Nepal Himalaya. And as many of you will know, Nepal has 8 of the 14 8,000-meter peaks. And Nepal is a major destination for climbers, trekkers all over the world. So this is one of the so-called smaller peaks of Nepal, Cholatse, 6,440 meters. It's in the Everest region, part of the Everest trek. And one of the trekkers, I think, is heading up to take a photograph. So Annapurna area is another very major trekking area in Nepal, the Annapurna Base Camp, the Annapurna Circuit. And this is the south wall of Annapurna 1. This is an 8,000-meter peak, one of the 14 8,000-meter peaks from the base camp, which is 4,050 meters. So in fact, you're looking up at about 4,000 meters of sheer mountain wall, which is like a vertical mountain wall in front of you. And this wall of Annapurna 1, was first climbed in 1970 by a British expedition led by Sir Chris Bonington. It was a landmark climb because such big walls had never been climbed before. And Bonington went on later in 75 to climb the southwest face of Everest. It's 50 years of that expedition now. And so the British made 2 landmark climbs which changed the face of big wall climbing. This is again from the Annapurna Base Camp on another trip. There was a huge amount of snow that year. In those days, it used to snow a lot in the Himalayas as compared to now when we hardly get any snow. And this was our camp, in fact. And I came out in the morning. The snow had stopped. It was early morning. The moon is setting. And I think one of us have put on a light in the tent. And this mountain is Hyunchuli. It's one of the smaller peaks of the Annapurna Sanctuary. So if you're in the Himalaya in winter, you have a good chance of seeing the Milky Way because you need very clear atmosphere. The atmosphere needs to be very clear. So this is in the Annapurna region in a location called Poon Hill. Poon Hill is also a very popular trekking destination. It's about 3,000 meters. It's reached in about 2 or 3 days from Pokhara. It's not a very difficult walk, so everybody can aspire to reach Poon Hill. And if you're there in the evening and it's clear like this, you will see the Milky Way like this with Dhaulagiri, one of the 8,000 meter peaks in front of you. So Everest Base Camp is on the bucket list of all trekkers. Everybody wants to go to Everest Base Camp, like all climbers wish to climb Everest. But other than Everest Base Camp, there are some other treks in the Everest region. Like one of them is a very difficult trek called the Three Passes Trek. And this is one of those 3 passes called Chola, which is 5,420 meters. And my group has in fact just crossed the Chola and is coming down onto the other side. But this is a glaciated ice field. And in bad weather, like the snow which Nepal had recently, it can be a very risky and difficult crossing. And I've attempted Chola 3 times, and this was the 3rd time when I was successful, because the other 2 times, due to bad weather, snowfall, we had to bring the group back, mainly because of safety reasons. We could not take a risk of getting them across and getting stranded and then, having a major crisis on our hands. So this is one of the other passes of the Everest region called Renjola, and it starts from a village called Gokyo, where there are 5 high-altitude lakes. One of our trekkers is about to cross actually where the mist is, you have a lake below that, which you cannot see. And he's heading up, actually, and the peak in the back is Cholatse, and on the right is Tapoche. It's also a very spectacular location. So this is also in the Everest region. The peak you see here is Lobuche East. So Nepal has a designation of peaks which they call trekking peaks. These are so-called smaller peaks, around 6,000 meters in height. But the word trekking is actually a misnomer because they are not trekking peaks. They are basically mountaineering peaks of a smaller height. So this is our base camp of Lobuche East. You can see our tents here, and some of our trekkers are heading to the base camp. It's quite a steep push from here to the top of Lobuche East. So I just included this picture to give some variation from mountains. Sometimes when we are in the mountains, we are always focused on the big things. We want to see big peaks, big sunrises, big sunsets, and we always look for that. So, things which are near us, like in the water or in a stream or a leaf in the forest or a plant, we normally miss out. So on one year we were walking and it started snowing, and then the snow stopped and these ice crystals had formed in the river, and part of the twigs of a branch had actually got iced over like this. It was very interesting to see and very spectacular as well. So if you're in the Himalaya anytime, look at the smaller things as well. Don't just stick to the big mountains. So culturally, the Himalaya is very rich. I don't have enough time in this presentation to get into that in detail, so I've just shown you 2 pictures. On the left is a skeleton dancer in Sikkim. It's an Enche monastery. In Sikkim, like in Ladakh and in Spiti and in Nepal and Bhutan, you have what they call the mass dances, where on auspicious days, like Losar and Lusong, in the monasteries, they dance these spectacular dances. So this was in Enche many years back. And on the right, this is what is known as an Agni Puja as part of a festival called Dumji. Dumji is a Sherpa festival. It takes place in the Solokhumbu in the monsoon. It's a 4 or 5 day festival. And on the last day of the festival, they have this Agni Puja where they light this massive fire. And this is the head monk or lama of the monastery who is actually praying to the gods. He prays actually to Guru Padmasambhava. That is the festival to Guru Padmasambhava for prosperity and good health and so on. So as I said, winter is a good time to be in the Himalaya if you can put up with the cold. And this is again Everest region, a mountain, a neighbor of Everest called Nupse, 7861 meters, reflected in a small lake. Winter, you get good sunsets like this. So if you can brave the cold, winter is a good time to actually go. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. I will show you 2 videos after this. So I just wanted to sum up in this presentation, what my thoughts are. So for the last 35 years, I've been in the Himalaya. I've spent most of my time there. And I think it's always been a search for the right light. Light, obviously, because without light, it's very difficult to get a photograph. The right time of the day also. Like you need to be there when the light is in the right place. You need to be there at the right moment when something is happening. And you need to try to convert an ordinary moment into an extraordinary moment. So that has basically been my philosophy, both photography and mountains, for the Himalaya. can we have the video? So there are two videos. The first one is on Ladakh, and the second one is on Kalapathar, which shows the view from a viewpoint. So this one is on Ladakh. It's self-explanatory. August 18th, 2023, and I'm on top of the Kongmarula, 5,260 meters on the Marka Valley trek. And as usual, it's a splendid view. The peaks in front are Jozongo West and Jozongo East, and a little further down, sticking out at the back, is Kangyatse 3, then Kangyatse 1, and the long knife-edged serrated ridge between Kangyatse 1 and Kangyatse 2. And finally Kangyatse 2, the peak on the right, which is an off-climb trekking peak, carry you further down towards the ranges of Zanskar and the rest of Ladakh. It's a wonderful day, and going behind me, the hills and valleys of Ladakh and the way we go down today to Chokdo. So this was a live sound recording. It hasn't been edited. I mean, whatever I spoke is what you're hearing. That's why there's a lot of wind. You have the second video, please. 29th November 2022, 3:40 p.m. in the afternoon, and I'm back at that iconic viewpoint, Kalapathar, where I have been many times, but each time is as magnificent as earlier. So here's Pumori right in front of us, and there's Lingtran peeking out from behind the ridge, and going further down, you have Kumbhutse, and here is the west shoulder of Everest. There's Changse at the back, and below that is the Lola, from where Mallory saw the western Kum. You can see part of the Kumbho Icefall, and there's Everest, the southwest face, the South Col, and the southeast ridge leading to the summit. This huge bulk of Nuptse dominates the view. As we keep going further down, there is Amadablam coming up from behind the ridge, and further down, Kangtega and Tamserku together, the Kumbho Icefall below. And as I finish this round, there is Taboche and Cholatse, a great day and a magnificent view. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.